Hey there, folks. I'm the Astral Architect. Some people call me Greg. And today I'm excited to introduce you to Tau-Tongue. Tau-Tongue is a symbolic algebra for meaning making and narrative scaffolding that I created because I am building an entire freaking universe and there's lots of stories to tell as a result. You know, a universe is a massive place, right? So, to be able to fight writer's block, I needed a system that was like, okay, well, here are the constraints of the story that you can tell today. And what I got out of it was something that allows me to sit down and come up with stories pretty much at will, which I adore. And it hasn't failed me in the year that I've been using it. And I finally have a tool that I can share with you that can allow you to use it as well in your creative endeavors. So, what do you say we dive in? This is the Tau-Tongue Articulator. It lives at articulator.tautongue.com. That description will be in the blog post and video description along with this video. The Tau-Tongue Articulator is a very simple sort of note-taking application that allows you to outline story ideas that are generated for you by Tau-Tongue equations. I'll show you what I mean. So we'll go to the new Articulator button, and we're presented with this screen. I'm going to shrink it so you can see my notes. Today, I want Tau-Tongue to tell me a story, please, in the style of a retro-futuristic, pulpy, urban fantasy noir kind of story. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're just going to say, why not? Tau-Tongue, tell me a story, please. And then we'll click Create Crucible. But before I do, I just want to show you what we're seeing on the screen because this is going to be your vibe check right here. This screen is your vibe check as you're typing. You haven't committed to a project yet. You're just brainstorming ideas. And the idea that we're getting back is one that I want to run with. I'll give you a little hint. This is my second take at this video. So this is hopefully going to be a lot faster. What we're going to do is we're going to say we have this central theme, right? And central themes are something that can spawn a story immediately if defined well. And the central theme of this one is a deep synthesis acting upon the catalyst. Now, you might not know what a catalyst is, so I've made these clickable so that you get like a little dossier of what the catalyst is. And here the catalyst is like a rebel, a jester, it can be not a person but a mistake that forces everyone to change. In this case, I see it as an opportunist because we're talking like fantasy noir and what makes a good protagonist. You know, you don't really want like hero vibes. You want sort of like anti-hero or straight up villain vibes in some cases. And I'm leaning more towards dark character. So I'm going to go more on the villainous side when I'm thinking of this. And the narrative roles there can help you figure out, you know, like what sort of protagonist we're talking about. But that's what I like to figure out first is like what's the central theme of the world that we're in and what is the main character like before I create my crucible. And this is your crucible right here. This deep synthesis acting upon the catalyst. And it's crossed by the antagonist, which is a truth in flux acting upon the archivist. And if we look up the archivist, it's like it can be a historian, a librarian, an AI in a sci-fi context. But in this case, I think what I'm thinking about is time itself or like history. Like, so not necessarily, so when it's an antagonist, I don't always think of a person. I think of what is the thing that is challenging the protagonist. And in this case, I think I'm thinking of time. So like when I look at this deep synthesis acting upon the catalyst, and the truth in flux is the antagonist acting upon the archivist, I suppose what I think about is someone who, deep synthesis, you know, like synthesis is to create, and deep, you know, meaning well-rooted, so like someone who's able to create well-rooted change, the catalyst. And because we're in a noir context, urban fantasy sort of thing, maybe we'll make him like a villain that somehow comes into possession of something that allows him to change the past or travel to the past, and things like that. And the side effect is that truth in flux acting upon the archivist. The truth in flux acting upon the past would mean that maybe the side effect of him traveling and unraveling the past and changing things is that it causes people's memories of what happened to become foggy. Like, it doesn't overwrite their original memory. Maybe it like fractures it, and they have like two contiguous memories for the same time slot. And that could cause a person to go kind of batty. So I like that idea. So we'll go ahead and we'll create the Crucible on this one. It doesn't matter what the spark you put in is. What matters is what you want to write as a result of that spark. So let me be clear. So over here in these notes, I could type some more, but I'm not going to because now we have the note-taking app. So I'm going to make this go away, and then we'll go full screen on the articulator. And let's start with the Crucible. So I'm going to say a few things here. Let me pull this up on my screen. And I will be right back. Alright, so the first thing I like to do when I get to this screen is I like to start filling in details about the Crucible and the Antagonist. The Crucible is a combination of our central theme and our protagonist, generally speaking. It can be either or both. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this is a story about a guy, Vinny Tennyson. Let's call him Tencent. Let's give him a mob name. Vinny Tencent Tennyson, who gains the ability to go back and change the past. But whenever he does, it screws with other people's memories of the event. Fracturing. What did I say? Fracturing it? It doesn't erase their old memory of what happened. His shenanigans cause the person to develop an overlaid memory on top of the old one that wreaks havoc. And because this is an urban fantasy, we need some magical elements, some surrealist sort of either supernatural, magic, paranormal, something like that. Something that makes it fantastical, or like creatures. And I've got no idea for that yet, but as far as this goes, we've got the archivist energy, right? That time-based energy. So maybe that's wrapped up in a person. And because Vinny is a hot-blooded man, maybe it's a woman. And noir, generally has a dame, so maybe this dame is the source of all the trouble. I like that because that's very noir. They always show up and throw the detective into a tailspin kind of thing. So we'll say Vinny meets a mysterious woman for a one-night stand. Sure, why not? And has an amazing night, but all she leaves behind when he wakes up the next morning is a note with a kiss and an earring on the floor by the nightstand. He pockets the earring and promptly ends up in the past in his apartment. Let's not make it a one-night stand. No, we'll leave it a one-night stand. That's I think that's more noir-y, you know, to like make it sort of gritty and spontaneous feeling. So yeah. He pockets the earring and promptly ends up in the past in his apartment right before he meets the woman. The day before. The day before. Yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit about the antagonist too. So let us address the woman. The woman, and she'll get a better name at some point. Right now, she's like more of like a creature is what I think of her as. This temporal creature in woman drag. This sort of temporal creature in woman drag is enforcer of injustice, of past injustices. She can move through time and correct or not injustices made. And she just lost one of her most precious artifacts. Yeah, the earring, right? So, an earring that allows her to hear injustices of the past and travel to them. The other earring allows her to reach in and touch the past, correcting those injustices, or in some cases, avenging them. Yeah, I'm happy with that. She discovers Tennyson has the earring, but he's a squirrely guy. She'll stop at nothing to get the earring back before it brings down judgment on them all. Now you might be wondering, like, where am I getting all that from? Well, I'm getting it from this A Truth in Flux acting upon the archivist. It was enough for me. And if that's not enough for you, there's actually a full braid equation specifically representing the antagonist, and I'll show you that in a second. It's something that I need to add into the interface that's not here yet, but it's literally all that's missing is the equation right here on this screen. That's what else I would be using. The problem is she can't catch him because he keeps disappearing into different moments in his own past. Yeah. Okay. So we'll save that. And I told you I'd show you something. So this is your braid. Your braid describes the action in sweeping strokes in this case for your narrative. Each one represents a key beat, like an act, a chapter, or a scene. And in this case, since we only have 3, I'm going to treat it as 3 acts. Okay? And I want to show you the equation versus what is in the braid because the antagonist is pulled from the equation. So the crucible is calculated from the sum of all these numbers being repeatedly summed down to a single digit. So if you take these numbers in these functions right here and just add them all together, they'll add up to 5. And then the antagonist is the longest of these 4 braids that I've highlighted here on my screen. So if I look real close, it looks like this right here is the antagonist because the symbol matches, right? So this right here, the archivist, the one thing that's missing is the truth and flux acting upon the archivist from the UI. I need to add this equation function in the notes screen so that you have that to draw on when you're doing your notes. Because one of the other ways you use Tau-Tongue, we just exercised what I call the 10,000 foot view lens. But there's also 5 other lenses. So I'll show you really quickly. I call it Braidcraft. That's the act of interpreting Tau-Tongue. What you're seeing on the screen is the Tau-Tongue documentation website. It's not available yet, but it will be soon. I'm just waiting on some paperwork to come through so that I can publish this. Nothing crazy. I just have to reset like some publishing keys so that I can get this online. Now that was the 10,000 foot view that we applied. The 10,000 foot view, you don't look into the braid at any level of depth. You focus on the crucibles. These, when you take a braid and you convert it to just a single digit like this, you're defining its micro crucible. And this would be called a proto crucible. Those terms aren't really that important. What you understand is that this is an abbreviation of that. Okay? So, I was thinking, of this makeup when I wrote these notes. I wasn't just completely basing it on this. And I'll show you how to get into that. I call that the temporal order and archetypal presence lenses when you're interpreting the individual digits. So we've got some good notes, right? Like we've defined who Vinny is. Vinny meets a mysterious woman who is the antagonist, and they end up having a fling, and she leaves behind an earring and a note that says, "See you never," basically. He just says, well, fuck. And he puts the earring in his pocket, and as he goes to move from, let's say, in my head, he's moving away from the bedside tables. He's putting the thing in his pocket, and he walks through the doorway, and his partner is sitting in his living room, and he realizes his partner is wearing clothes from the past. So there, he's walked back in time. He just doesn't know it yet, I think, is what I want to happen. And you might be wondering, Astral, like, where are you getting this? And it's like my imagination is going crazy just from seeing this crucible and this antagonist. And then this is my second take with this, so I'm a little more familiar with the equation than you would be so far. So after I get some good notes up here and I have a good feel for the theme, I like to start mapping things out against the braid. And like I said, the braid acts as time markers in your story or event markers. Let's put it that way. Like what are the major 3 things that happen in this case in the story? And that makes me think of how narrative is told. And so I think of act-based stories. And there's a rising action, climax, and falling action. Or there could be inciting incident, rising action, climax. I'm going to, since this is a noir urban fantasy, want to do a inciting incident, rising action, climax. And so to start Braid One, I think what we'll do is we'll look at the temporal order here of the equation. And so, because an opening needs an inciting incident, we'll start with the morning after. So, bear with me here. I'm going to use the voice input. You don't have to type. If you're not a very fast typer or you're on your device, you can use the voice input feature, and I'll just say, Vinny wakes up the morning after an amazing night with a mysterious woman. He finds her earring. In the next door he passes through while holding the earring, it acts as a portal. And the problem with this, you'll find, is that it doesn't use punctuation. That's the only thing. So that's a little bit of a pain in the butt. But it's really good at understanding. In the next door he passes through while holding the earring, it acts as a portal and transports him back in time to the day before he met the woman. On that day, Vinny did a bad thing. You see, he's not called Vinny Tencent for nothing. No, the man's an enforcer for the local mob. And he just done a bad thing for his boss. Murdered, let's say, 3 men in cold blood because his boss told him to. They were innocent, but Vinny isn't bothered by that kind of thing. He's a bad person. He realizes something is amiss, but not that he's traveled back in time yet. He realizes it quickly when he sees his partner in clothes that he last saw covered in the blood spatter of one of their victims. I'm reading my notes from the previous session. I do apologize. I'm not trying to make this boring. Vinny, confused, but remembering that this has all happened before, has a bit of a fit and lets go of the earring he's been clenching in his fist, dropping it into like a shirt pocket. After noticing, hey, my partner was talking about a big score. Side gig. So here's what he notices during that conversation. He says, haven't we had this conversation before, or something like that? And that causes the partner to be like, what are you talking about, man? We got to focus. We got to go. We got to get ours, you know? And it's this side gig that the boss doesn't know about. Yeah. Hey, my partner was there to take me out on a job for a big score, and it's a side gig the boss man doesn't know about. But right then, he's popped back into the present. Empty apartment. Note from the night, the lady in his offhand. Yeah. And then we would move on to the next braid. Now, how did I do that, right? Like, how did I come up with all that? And as you know, I was typing from notes. But where did those notes come from? Well, it says a safe recursion acting upon the mechanist. So this is where we have to establish the system. In other words, the mechanist is going to be this system of being able to use the earrings to both see injustices of the past on people and then go back and change them, right? The other earring, the one that he doesn't have, allows him to change things. But the one that he does have allows him to see injustices of the past. And he sees this moment, and he doesn't know that yet, but like he sees this moment, and he's like, oh, the injustice here in my head, this is how it goes. Like I said, he doesn't know about this injustices rule, but like if he did, he'd be like, oh, well, the obvious injustice here is that I didn't get to go on that job, so I'm going to go on that job and I'm going to do what my partner was going to do, but I'm not even going to tell my partner about it. I'm just going to try and do it myself. And that's sort of where I think this first braid leaves him. And the way that I got here is this. I was thinking about the mechanist acting as the system, time itself, right? And the rules of time. And it says a safe recursion acting upon the mechanist. Well, that's where like a safe pattern plays itself out. And if he's touching the earring, the pattern that plays itself out is that you go back in time and see an injustice or witness what becomes an injustice. And so the safe recursion bit is the time travel where he's not able to change things. That's why it's a safe recursion. And then you have the one coming after that, which is about the woman. So I was like, okay, it's the woman that gives him the ability to travel back in time. One representing the Dreamweaver, creative energy, the birthing energy. So that's why I was like, oh, it's a woman. And then this scaffolds an idea in his head. 3 is the architect energy, which is the next number in this braid. And so I was like, architect, how do I do that? And I'd be like, well, maybe he's a schemer, you know, like maybe Vinny's a schemer. And so remember, we're not just defining a story here, we're also further defining our protagonist the deeper we go into each of these braids, because these braids are things happening to our protagonist. So we're saying to ourselves, you know, like if the character were to encounter a moment of architecture, what would that be like? And to me, it's that dawning moment where he's like, wait a minute, I did miss out on something that day, yesterday. I didn't get to go on that job. All I got to do was kill those guys. I want to go on that job, but it's expired, you know, like it had to be done yesterday, and then they got interrupted and sent on that mission to kill those guys. And then 7 is the archivist, memory, time. And so what can happen next in this first act, when he gets back, he goes to meet with his partner, and his partner says, what are you talking about? You went back in time. Or something? I wasn't at your apartment. How much drugs did you do, man? And this is what causes Vinny to see, which is that last one, the oracle. This is what causes Vinny to see the opportunity he has sitting in his shirt pocket. A way to go back and revisit the past that might let him take that side gig his partner had mentioned for himself. Yeah. And I'm going to try and be quick here. This next braid, what we've got is a truth is edifice acting upon the alchemist. And so the alchemist energy is that of transformation and transmutation. It can also represent mystery. It can represent revelation. It could be an inner struggle, metamorphosis. Narrative roles are like a broken warrior who becomes a teacher or a hermit who finds meaning in exile. But in our case, it's going to be Vinny. It's going to be Vinny. And we're going to reframe despair into possibility here in this section. So I'm going to say remembering the job that his partner set up on the side was interrupted by the boss's enforcement call, would have made them some major FU money. The problem is that the opportunity sailed that day. They had to do the job they couldn't do. They had to do the murdering, so they couldn't do the job instead. And I'm going to paste in the rest of my notes here because we need to get through this. But again, what I'm doing is I am reading the sequence of events here. This is a Braidcraft lens that we call temporal order. And it's described here in the documentation. But basically what it says is you proceed through these, right? And you interpret the meaning of each of those archetypes. And one of the things I need to add to the interface are little links that will pop up what the archetype is for each link in case you don't have them memorized. I happen to have them memorized, so I know that this 5 corresponds to the protagonist as well as the catalyst energy. So one of the little games I play with myself is when I see the 5, which matches the protagonist energy, that's the character acting in their nature to me. You know, like that's the character just being themselves. And we know that Vinny is an opportunist, that he's a murderer, that he is now got the ability to trespass through time. So I'm going to paste in the rest of my notes. And then we'll move on to the next one. Basically, what happens in beat 2 or act 2 is it's all action. So it's Vinny remembering the past of what happened the day before. So you find out the full story of what happened the day before. And then we'll do sort of like an unreliable narrator trick. So let me put this note in, unreliable narrator here. What we don't know is that Vinny isn't reliving the memory. He's holding the earring and actually in the past again in this whole act where we see the day before play out. So what happens is their boss calls them to make a correction with three locals that had pooled their resources to borrow money, and they defaulted. And Vinny tries to get information out of his partner with the details so he can snag the score that the partner was talking about themselves. And that's got to be confusing for the partner because he doesn't understand why Vinny's asking all these questions about something that'll never happen now. But it doesn't work with one man. It's a two-man, and only one person seems to be able to travel with the earring, which will play out during this reliving somehow. I'm not sure how yet. And that's fine. Vinny confides in his partner eventually, and they set out to find the woman. Maybe the second earring she has will let his partner travel back in time with him. This involves 3 trips, short back to the past experiments where Vinny is unable to alter the past, and the side effect of his trying is that it fuzzes out the memory of the other people that were in that event, making it foggy and hard to recall, and maybe it causes like a hysteria of sorts because they have these 2 memories that they can't reconcile since they took place at the same time. And all of that was read from saying, okay, there's that 2, there's that 2, there's at least 2 recursions, and then there's the scaffolding that we were talking about, the scheming, right? And then we move on to the next beat, which is the final act of the story. And if we come back here, note that these changes are auto-saved, like I can refresh, and my notes will still be there. I just want you to trust that. So finally, we have Braid 3, and in Braid 3, it goes something like this, and then we'll wrap it up. Vinny's repeated meddling turns time itself into the system of this particular micro-crucible, a decaying pattern acting upon the mechanist. In this case, I'm treating the mechanist as the temporal order of all, you know, like time itself and the structure that imposes on us. When I wrote these notes, I took a look at the narrative texture too. So there's going to have to be some time. There's going to have to be some time spent with the woman here, perhaps as dialogue in a flashback to the night he meets the woman. And the reason for that is because the narrative texture says that this sets up the sort of framework that she operates in. And maybe Vinny's asking different questions this time because he's on a recursion. There's no recursion defined here, but look at how Act 2 ends. It ends with 2, the recursivist, which is a pattern playing itself out after we see the architect followed by the catalyst. So what that makes me think of is Vinny is like, duh, I'll just go back and I'll squeeze her for information. I'm smart. Goes back in time to his date with the woman and thinks he'll squeeze her for information because he's a smart guy and she's just a dame. He's a sexist too. This is a despicable person. So let's go through these notes. So what happens is basically he blows his cover and she realizes her earring is gone in the past. And that just makes shit hit the fan and it calls in the watchdogs. And so maybe that is how his greed draws him to his end, in other words. So like we never make it past him thinking, oh, I'm so smart, I'm going to go outsmart this dame and get her other earring and figure out how this all works so I can go back and get that score. And maybe she lets him even make it so far. Maybe she even lets him make it so far as the alley outside the job with his partner in tow, and then she enacts her vengeance for having used her artifact to trespass and try to rewrite time. And so now we've got like a complete 3-set arc. I did this one based on using her as the woman as the energy of the Dreamweaver. The Dreamweaver is the dominant force in this braid. There are 3 ones here. So I'm using a different Braidcraft lens there. I'm using archetypal presence to evaluate and determine, you know, like what this scene is about. So with the decaying pattern acting upon the mechanist, basically Vinny, what he's doing isn't sustainable. It's not unnoticeable. And so the authorities, the temporal order, takes notice and they move in. And so now you have the woman, Vinny, and the temporal order to deal with is sort of my thinking. And that was brought in by that 6 energy. The 6 represents the empath or the feelings of others. And I was like, others. Let's bring in others. I like fixated on that. And so like she's going to sick the watchdogs on him basically as he's going about setting up the job in this 3rd act. And then right as he gets to the 3rd act, we're going to get that noir sort of ending where she exacts her vengeance upon him and basically ends his life. I know it's dark, but this is an urban fantasy noir story. And now we're at 40-something minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up by showing you what do you do with this once you've gotten all your notes in place. What I like to do is I like to go to export and I make a couple copies. For one, I download the session. That's so that I can transport this between my phone and my computer. So like right now it's on my computer, but I might want it on my phone later. So you download the TTA file, and then what you can do is you can actually go to the articulator and you can import that TTA file right here. That's also how you make backup copies so that it's safe and you know that it's on your computer. It's not in a, it is in a readable format, but it's not meant for humans. It's meant for this system. And now let's go back to Tau-Tongue, tell me a story, please. And let's just see, she enacts her, yeah, this is the I was just double checking because I've got 2 versions of this in here. And you could print this. It prints really pretty, in my opinion. It's plain, but it's workable. So you could print that to PDF, or I'm going to download an HTML copy so I can show you. This is what you get as an export. It's a summary of everything you just did. So it says the archetype is the catalyst, one who initiates change and transformation, sparking new possibilities. And then here we have my notes on the Crucible, we have my notes on the Antagonist, and my note for each of these braids. And I could print this out. It also has some more information about the symbols down at the bottom. The dominating resonance, which is transformation, evolution, the flow of life. This is the circle of life. I don't know why I did that. I apologize. Your phrase resonates with the energy of change, represented by the digital root 5. So that's the narrative interpretation for the Crucible, all down there at the bottom, directly from Tau-Tongue, not from us in our notes. So I would use this, and I would have this on screen. And then over here in Evernote, I might start, fully outlining the story. Or what I would do is I might go back to the articulator and I might download a markdown copy. Now, what do you do with the markdown copy? Me, I take it to AI and I'll be like, hey, ChatGPT, because sure, why not? Let's drag this into the chat and I'll say, hey, I'm working on a story and I wanted to share the outline with you. you can ignore the funky math stuff and let's just talk about the big picture story concept. And this is a format that AI can use to read and understand what it is you've written. It's just a plain text format with a little bit of extra formatting if you don't know what Markdown is. And as you can see, we're off to the races. It's evaluating my concept and things like that. So, that is how you use Tau-Tongue to develop stories. I had no idea who Vinny was when I got up this morning. I just knew that I needed to do a tutorial that could show you how Tau-Tongue works and what a session looks like. And as you can see, in 45 minutes, we were able to go from 0 to 100 with the idea. We got a complete story outline in concept form, Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And then our next step would be to expand upon that. And you can use the articulator for that too. So if we go back to the articulator and we go new articulator, we can say Vinny 10-cent Tennyson is not a good man. By some luck, though, he meets a woman, a sort of fate, if you will, and he manages to get a hold of a bit of her magic by way of one of her earrings. This seems to let him trespass, I like using that word, through time. Chaos ensues. And there, we have a basic, very compressed, no spoilers summary of what the story is about, right? And now we've got a new Crucible with 25 braids and a new antagonist, right? And that antagonist can still be the woman, and the sacred equivalence acting upon the mask maker can still be the Vinny guy, but now we have, or it could be the temporal order even. But what I'm getting at is we could create this as a crucible. And note that it has 25 braids. This is a much longer, much more involved outlining process. But what you could do is take that concept of Vinny and the woman and then expand upon it again. This is called recursion. We're feeding the output of our last session into a new session. And we would do the same sort of thing. We would say, well, how would a sacred equivalence acting upon the mask maker affect this story? So we'd look and see like what the mask maker is. And this is like about your role, or the double agent who's no longer, ooh, that's perfect. A double agent who's no longer sure which side is real. Well, that could be Vinny, and the side effects of the temporal recursion with Vinny could be that by the end, he's no longer sure what's real. He's just a ruined, hollow husk of a man because of what this woman's going to do to him. So that could kind of work. So I could start to work this into a longer outline. And because there are 25 braids here, I've got the ability to treat each one of these as a scene, right? So if we figure a scene is like 1,000 to 1,500 words, and we bring out our trusty calculator, we'll say 1,500 words on the high side, right? Times 25. That's 37,500, and that's in my comfortable zone for word count, which is what I'm talking about here, word count. So that's a novella right there. If I wanted a slightly longer story, then what I could do is go back to the articulator, click new articulator, and then start experimenting with different sparks to get a longer number of braids, right? And that's the idea behind using the articulator, is that it is also recursive. So Vincent Vinny 10 Cent Tennyson is not a good man. This new spark that I've created is a new equation, as you can see, and it's a 22 sacred equivalence equation, so the mask maker, crossed by a bonded recursion acting upon the mechanist. And we established in that previous outline that the mechanist represented the temporal order, the system of time that acts upon us all. And a bonded recursion, well, that's that earring, right? Like the earring allows him to go back into the past. But that means like a bonded pattern, right? Like maybe it becomes like an addiction. So as we stretch this out into a new story, we would start at the beginning again with Braid One, and then we would apply our different braidcraft lenses, like archetypal presence, temporal order, the 10,000-foot view. Those are the three that we covered, but there are more. There's braid entanglement, which is saying how does this braid play with the previous braid or the next braid? Like how do they work with each other? And in your case, that won't be necessarily comparing the numbers so much as comparing the numbers of your current braid to the notes of the previous braid, or a previous braid if it's like a callback or a flashback or something. And then there's two experimental lenses, and then we'll wrap it up here. There's the telemetry of evolution, which is when you're looking at an equation. Let me pull this over here so we have these side by side. You track the energy flow and transformation rate, or like the archetypal motion. This is treating digits as power ratings rather than archetypes. So if you look at this opening scene, which is described as an action type scene in the articulator, thanks to Tau-Tongue, it's got a lot of high energy, right? Like it goes 5, 7, then drops to 2, and then 5, 7, 5. And then drops to 4, and then back up to 6. And so that's the telemetry, right? Like the rise and fall of the power of each number in the system. You know, like 5 is less than 7, but 7 is way greater than 2 by 5. So that's how you use that to sort of gauge like the energy of a scene, right? Like this is a fairly high energy scene. And then you have archetypal harmonics, which is like you need to gauge whether a scene is harmonious or discordant. So there might be families of harmonics. And the cool thing is the catalyst, when you click on it, you scroll down here and it has the tension pairs, right? Like these are high tension elements. And there's only two high tension elements in this particular braid. There's the Oracle 4 and the Empath 6, and they're here at the end. So like the highest tension in this scene might be described as being at the end. And so when you use these lenses, it makes interpreting this a lot faster because you're not just staring at an archetype in this case, the catalyst. You're looking at the sequence of events inside this equation. That's the purpose of Tau-Tongue, is to provide these constraints to make it more creative for you. And the way it makes it more creative is it's saying, okay, you have to figure this out, but this, and that are true. So figure it out in that scenario where those three things are true. And that makes it slims the possibility, but still gives you the ability to be creative because you get to decide how the protagonist would react in that situation. So I find that very valuable. I've gotten a lot of value out of doing this. I have a application that I built called Epic Engine, and when I created Tau-Tongue, I started testing and testing. And as you can see here, I generated a lot of outlines using AI and Tau-Tongue to do it, using this same braidcraft approach. And there's over 80 outlines here. I've got another platform I'm working on which is dedicated just to using AI to create stories using Tau-Tongue. It's got 8 outlines in it, or 6 it looks like. Let me refresh. Looks like I need to log in again. Yeah, 7. So like I'm testing and building as fast as I can, and it's going really well. In a couple days we'll have the Tau-Tongue website up and ready to go. Right now it's not quite ready to launch because the package right here that you need to install isn't available yet. I'm almost got it sorted, but I'm not quite there. So do bear with me. I hope you've enjoyed this walkthrough of what Tau-Tongue is. I hope you'll try out the articulator and use it for yourself, and even share with me what you come up with. My Tau-Tongue articulator will be linked to from the Astral Architecture blog, as well as down below this video. Have that great day. Always be creating, and I'll see you in the next video.